You've been erased before, not just forgotten, erased. Your presence, your ideas, your work cut off by a mind that decided in an instant you were not worth keeping. Not by accident, cruelty, or indifference, but by biology. Every second it decides forget, 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 keep. So most things don't make the cut, but the rare few that do, they just don't fill your memory. They shape the way you think, the way you feel, the way you see. But why? In the Laws of Human Nature, Robert Greene hints the answer by saying this: the human brain is a pattern recognition machine. It ignores the ordinary and locks onto the unexpected. This is known as the von Restorff Effect. We don't remember what blends in, we remember what breaks the script. The contrast between what's expected and what actually happens. So being memorable is not about being the loudest, the flashiest, or the most extreme. It's about controlling that contrast, because once you do, you won't just stay in people's minds, you will shape what they see, what they trust, and what they believe is possible. Everything memorable, every idea, every person, every movement stands out because of contrast. That contrast isn't just about being different. It's a tool you can use to influence how people think, feel, and act. A persuasion tool. And that contrast happens in three ways. Contrast in ideas, challenge what people assume is true and force them to rethink it. Contrast in perception, disrupt an expected rhythm so people can't ignore it. Contrast in identity, be the only one in your space who does something in a certain way. Let's start with contrast in ideas, because persuasion starts with attention, and nothing captures attention faster than flipping a mental model. What if I asked you, do you know what kills motivation? Not failure, not doubt, but success. That's right. Hitting a big win can be the very thing that stops you from moving forward, because the moment you reach a peak, your brain assumes that work is done. It relaxes, it stops pushing. Do you see the contrast in ideas? We're not just talking about challenging thoughts, we're changing how people feel about their progress. When you flip an idea like that, people don't just hear it. They need to understand it, because something they accepted as true was challenged. If contrast in ideas tricks the brain into paying attention, what will lead people in the direction of that disruption? Imagine this: a movie starts playing. You can see the opening, but there is no sound, no music, just silence. You wait, your brain expects something, a soundtrack, a voice, a sound effect, but nothing happens. So what do? You check your volume, you tap the screen, you lean in closer trying to hear something that was supposed to be there. And right there, the von Restorff effect is acting in real time, not just grabbing your attention as we just saw, but also creating a gap that invites your reaction. Why does this work? Because our brains are wired to predict patterns. When you ask a question, you expect an answer. When you turn a doorknob, you expect it to open. When you watch a movie, you expect sound. But the second something breaks that expectation, you don't just notice it, you react to it. And that's the missing piece most people don't understand about persuasion. Attention alone isn't enough. To persuade, you have to provoke a reaction. And the easiest way to do that, disrupt what people expect. Add a gap between the dots. To connect the dots, they have to fill in the gap by themselves. People don't just notice the contrast, they react to it. But how can we make the von Restorff effect not just the strategy you use, but a part of who you are? Imagine that you walk into a room where everyone is dressed in formal suits, but one person is wearing jeans and a hoodie. Who catches your attention? Who will you remember and tell your friends about? Contrast in identity is not being the best, it's being the only one. Because when something is distinct, it feels rare. And when something feels rare, it also feels valuable. And here's the best part: People assume that when someone does something that's rare, it's because of who they are, not just what they do. It's not just the jeans and the hoodie. It's the identity of someone confident enough to wear it in that room. It's curious, intriguing, defiant, memorable. So here's your test. What's the one thing about you that nobody else in your space does? Not forced, not manufactured, just you, but dialed in. Most people blend in because they don't ask this question, but because you're able to ask this question now, you will not chase trends, you will create them. So how do you use the von Restorff effect as a persuasion tool and turn ideas into influence? When you flip a mental model, you don't just share an idea, you make people question what they thought they knew. When you disrupt perception, you don't just get attention, you create an open loop their brain needs to close. When you own contrast in your identity, you don't just stand out, you become the only one, the trend setter. But there's still a missing component. Think about this. Why are you still here? Not just listening, but following this all the way through. Think about it. This entire conversation was structured using the von Restorff effect. Not to trick you, not to manipulate you, but to make sure the ideas didn't just pass through your mind like background noise. This is the missing component. The von Restorff effect is not a trick. It's responsibility. It takes standing where nobody else will stand, saying what nobody else will say, being the contrast in a world that stays inside the lines. Not for attention, not for approval, nor even for legacy, but because the world needs passion, and passion doesn't blend in. It breaks the rhythm. It challenges the script. It steps into the light not for itself, but to pull others forward. Because in the end, your ideas, your message, your brand won't be remembered for how they stood out. They will be remembered for what they stood for.